Hey guys, welcome to the third Pocketnow PocketCast, and we're happy to say that we are on iTunes now. Hopefully the next step is that we will be on Zune. We've submitted our feed. You'll be able to get onto that soon and download the PocketCast to your Zune or your Windows Phone 7. Right now you can go get it on your iPhone, iPod Touch, iPad. Fill in the blank. So today we have three people with us once again. We've got Evan, my permanent co-pilot here. Say hi, Evan.
Hey guys.
Hey Evan. And we've also got Adam Lane, who actually has been with Pocketnow longer than any of us actually combined. He's been here since the year 2000 or 2001. Say hi, Adam.
Hello.
Adam knows a lot about phones, and we always benefit from his knowledge of especially Windows Phone. He's been a Windows Phone user from the beginning, using Windows CE devices when they couldn't even go on the internet. So he has a really interesting perspective on sort of the mobile industry, which is great because there's a lot to talk about today, especially in dealing with Nokia and the announcement that they are going to choose Windows Phone 7 as their primary smartphone operating system. But first, before we get into that, Adam happens to be among the very small number of people in the world that have an HTC 7 Pro that is like the form factor like the Touch Pro 2 running Windows Phone 7. It has the slide-out keyboard with the tilting screen. How is the 7 Pro, Adam?
It's pretty nice. There's a lot of things to like about it, but there's some cons to it as well. I really like the tilting screen, how it automatically tilts up. That's something we haven't seen before.
Right.
And it's got the Touch Pro 2 keyboard, which is, probably the best mobile keyboard ever made.
It is.
But, yeah, it's slightly different. The buttons are not raised as much, but they still feel pretty much the same. So you get the great feel to that keyboard. They're a little bit less clicky too. So
I have a question. So it seems that you can only get the screen in one position when you slide it out. It's tilted up. Can you tilt it and keep it flat?
No. It just tilts to one angle, and that's what it is. You can try to tilt it down, but it's going to pop right back up.
I have a question, too, in that vein, Adam. Windows Mobile 7 right now is mainly a portrait-oriented OS. So how does that work when you're flipping the keyboard out in a lot of screens that aren't meant to be turned?
Yes, that's one of the not-so-good things about this. So most of the places where you're going to be inputting text will rotate to landscape, but things like the home screen doesn't rotate, most of the hubs don't rotate. And there's one place where it's really annoying, is if you're searching for a contact in the People Hub, it does not rotate.
Ooh.
So you're going to type a contact's name with the keyboard slid out in landscape mode, but the layout is still in portrait mode, which is really weird and annoying.
And I guess, we saw that Windows Phone 7 didn't rotate back a long time ago when we were testing the LG Panther. I guess it doesn't make that much sense. I mean, if you were developing the software for Windows Phone 7, Adam, what would you have the home screen do when you slid out your keyboard? I guess it doesn't make sense for it to go for the whole screen to rotate.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's hard to say. You could either have it totally rearrange itself so that maybe there's 4 live tiles across the top row.
Right.
But that would be kind of weird, wouldn't it?
It would be.
Why don't the tiles just have their contents rearranged, but stay in the same place, but have, the text shift and the images shift.
And still have a landscape sliding from left to right instead of top to bottom.
Right.
That won't really work on the longer horizontal live tiles, like the HTC Hub. Oh, well, maybe it's just the type rotated.
Right. That could, all the shapes would, because that's the biggest problem you have is getting these shapes to, it's like a puzzle, is getting them to fit, nicely in both portrait and landscape. And we see that problem with widgets a lot on the Android is getting them to work properly when there's a rotation involved. So I think the best situation when you have, very finite shapes like this, like squares and rectangles, is to just leave them and to have the contents of the boxes change character. It would be more than changing just the text. You'd have to change the imagery too. But
yeah, that would be cool. Yeah, so literally the tiles are staying in place, I think, what you're suggesting, Evan, but then just the text literally rotates 90 degrees or whatever it might be.
Right, it would have to be a little bit more complicated than that on some of them, but that's basically what the gist would be. Yeah, I don't think it would be super hard to implement something like that.
One of the advantages to Windows Phone 7, as I'm learning, as I'm looking into app development for a Pocketnow app this year, is that because it's so standardized across all these devices, to make an app for Windows Phone 7 is so easy, because you know the screen size, you know that the home screen's not going to rotate in landscape, there's one icon size, it's so much easier than Android, where you have to have 3 dimensions for splash screens, for icons, and I kind of like that about Windows Phone 7, that they kind of keep it locked down. It makes it a lot easier to develop for.
I'm sure there's some people who would disagree with you.
Naturally. Very good. So let's move on to the next thing. Really big news this week. Nokia held a press conference, and not to the surprise of the mobile world, they are putting Windows Phone 7 on future Nokia devices. They're kind of putting Symbian and MeeGo on the back burner. They'll still be creating phones with those, I guess, call them legacy operating systems now, but their focus going forward will be Windows Phone 7. And we were trying to figure out if this is a better situation for Microsoft or a better situation for Nokia. What do you guys think?
I think it's absolutely. I'm sorry, were you going to say something, Adam?
Oh, well, yes, sure. I'll go first. Yeah, I think it's going to be probably a win-win situation for both, but maybe slightly better for Microsoft. Because if Nokia is helping with this, ecosystem, they're developing a large worldwide ecosystem. Mm-hmm. Windows Phone is going to benefit from that, and anybody else who's building Windows Phones will also be able to tap into that new ecosystem.
What is this new ecosystem they keep talking about, for those that are unfamiliar?
Well, Nokia is going to help, distribute the phones, because they have a really big worldwide presence.
Right.
They're also going to add to the mapping capabilities, which Bing is kind of not great at.
Yeah.
In terms of other countries.
So Microsoft right now uses, for their Maps application, they use Bing Maps. Do you know whose map data that is?
I don't remember exactly. Was it Telnav?
Perhaps.
Yeah, it's either Navtech or Telemap.
It's not Navtech, because Nokia owns Navtech, right?
Yeah.
And that's what they're bringing forward. So they're going to have Navtech's very robust mapping suite of software, and presumably they'll be able to improve location-based services. Stephen Elop talks a lot about LBS location. Is that?
I think that's Telenav too, not Telemap, I believe, right?
Telenav, yeah.
Telenav for Bing.
And isn't that's owned by TomTom, right?
Sounds right.
I may be wrong on that. The nice thing about having these podcasts in front of the computer is you can look stuff up. So you guys can keep talking, and I'll check it out.
Perfect. Yeah, so I mean, Nokia has a lot to offer Microsoft, and Microsoft is kind of the saving grace for Nokia, because they are in a situation where they need software with an ecosystem, as they like to say, already built. So they thought about Android, and they were talking about how they thought about Android, but they thought it would be a little bit too difficult to differentiate in a very crowded and, dare we say, fragmented market, whereas Windows Phone 7, it's still new, it's still fresh, you've got a finite amount of players, and they feel like they can make a difference, and it seems like a win-win here.
I think it might be similar to what Motorola did, because Motorola was on their way out, They're in pretty bad shape, and then they went to Android, which was unproven at the time, beginner. And when they released their Droid, that basically put Android on the map.
Yeah, they were running out of variations of the Razor, and you're right. They went with Android as their saving grace, and they got in early too. Although earlier than Nokia is getting in here. I mean, they were the second, if I remember, the second Android phone after HTC's G1.
But it still took a year after the G1 was released, didn't it?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
So, guys, it's actually Atlas that TomTom owns.
And that is a mapping data company?
Yes. But that's one of the big two. Atlas and Navtech, I guess.
Very interesting. And so the news today, we've been following the Mobile World Congress news as our as our editor's on his way to Spain. The news was that Nokia hopes to release a Windows Phone 7 device this year, which obviously we knew before. There wasn't really anything new in the press conference. They were just talking about some of the reasons they went with Windows Phone 7, sort of what's going to happen to Symbian and MeeGo, and that's pretty much it. They didn't, we see these renders of Engadget leaked these renders of pretty nice-looking Nokia devices running Windows Phone 7, although they kind of look just like an HTC Mozart, except the back has an interesting contour design, and they come in colors. So that should be cool. I mean, how can Nokia make Windows Phone 7 hardware better? The camera is obviously one thing. Definitely the camera. But what else here?
Screens. I mean, they have that clear black technology that they're screens.
Nice screens.
Battery life.
Battery life. They probably know a lot about battery life.
And in general, I mean, Nokia, the hardware is generally pretty solidly constructed, so I think they'll bring some new materials to the table. Just, they're very good at design. So I think, even with some of the restrictions that Chassis 1 and then, later Chassis 2 will have laid down, I think Nokia will be able to work within those to come up with some pretty cool phones. But the question is, are they going to be cool enough for them to have the wide penetration that Nokia has sort of enjoyed over the last few years? And I think that's a big question. People like Nokia, and I think there's a lot of people that are angry that Nokia gave up Symbian. There's people that like Symbian, and they don't want to have to buy a feature phone in order to use the stripped down versions of whatever S60 that are going to stick around.
Yeah, well, I'm not angry because I was not a fan of Symbian, and I think most Americans aren't a fan of Symbian because we never really got the chance to use it. But certainly Europeans have known Symbian very, very well. So. Right.
I mean, Europe just invested, $30 million in the Symbian Foundation to try to prop it up, and now Nokia, which was kind of the last corporate benefactor, has basically turned its back. So I don't know. I think there's going to be some repercussions that we haven't seen yet.
Fair enough. Let's move on. There's a lot of other Mobile World Congress news out today. Sony Ericsson announcing 4 devices that we knew about. The Xperia Play, or let's start with the Xperia Arc, which we saw at CES. Super thin device running Gingerbread. And then they had the Xperia Play, which has been no secret. It's the sliding device that has the PlayStation-like controller, or the PS1-like controller. And then there's the Xperia Neo, kind of a mid-range Android 2.3 device, and my phone is ringing.
It's just on the podcast, or the PocketCast, Brandon. It's live and uncensored.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm not going to cut this part out. So the Neo is kind of a mid-range Android phone. And then finally, the Xperia Pro, which we didn't expect to see at all. I'm going to call it just another slide-down keyboard Android phone, and the keyboard doesn't look that juicy.
I wouldn't say that we didn't expect to see it at all, Brandon, because we sort of suspected that there was a keyboard version of the of the Neo coming along, and that's kind of what this is. So we were definitely looking for something like this, although we weren't sure that it would come at this show.
Yeah, that's a good way of classifying it, as a Neo with a slide-out keyboard. Unfortunately, it's using the same old 1 gigahertz Snapdragon single-core CPU, and even.
Did you ever think we'd be saying that? The old 1 gigahertz processor, 1 gigahertz. Geez, it's so last year.
No, it really is. In fact, I mean, we're starting to specify in our posts whether a phone has a single core or dual core processor, because hey, if it's not dual core, it's not cool. But as far as I know here, so all these new phones have single core processors. Even the Xperia Play, which of course is a gaming handset, should have a dual core processor. But maybe Sony Ericsson realizes that, hey, Android isn't ready for dual core processors. Forget what Motorola and LG and Samsung are doing. We're going to stick with the single core until Android is ready.
It also has to do a little bit with pricing. I'm sure that a dual core processor raises the price of the phone, and they probably want to make the Play a more mainstream device.
Yeah, but yeah, I know what you're saying. It would seem that with a carrier subsidy, it's going to Verizon, that they'd have some wiggle room to offer a more expensive device with a dual-core processor, and it's just a little disappointing.
Sure, but even, if it's a difference of, $100 versus $150, that, those, for consumers, those are two completely different price points.
What do you think the price is going to be on the Xperia Play on Verizon?
I think it will be $100 on contract.
100 is the new 200.
Yeah, AT&T really is really pricing the Inspire 4G quite aggressively, and I think unless you have something with dual core or very fast cellular broadband, LTE or HSPA plus, you're not going to be able to charge that $200 anymore, and certainly not the $250 or $300.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense that they're sort of bumping down these single-core devices to the $100 level, and anything that's dual-core is going to start off at $200, and up from there, as is the case with the Thunderbolt. Which of these Sony Ericsson phones do you find the most interesting, Adam?
Probably the Xperia Play.
Yeah.
It's got the slide-out stuff there. Everything else is just more of the same, isn't it?
Yeah, basically. Like we mentioned, the Arc is going to be really sweet hardware. It's going to have Sony Ericsson's interface, but of course you'll be able to root it and put on something a little bit lighter. By the way, and maybe you can look into this, Evan, as you sit in front of the computer. Sony Ericsson was around a very long time ago, and I thought they were a small player making feature phones before the days of smartphones, and then Sony bought Ericsson or merged with Ericsson?
No, Ericsson is still completely its own company. Sony Ericsson is a joint venture between the two companies. So instead of making their own cell phones, both Sony and Ericsson have come together, and now they make cell phones together. But Ericsson still makes other products on its own.
Don't they make cell phone tower equipment and such?
Yeah, it's a lot of
backhaul stuff,
I think.
Well, they're really coming through with a lot of great hardware. I wouldn't be surprised if Sony found a way to cut off the Ericsson part, because they're a very brand-focused company, and Sony Ericsson is definitely different than just Sony.
But Ericsson brings a lot of that interesting stuff that attracts Europeans to the table, I think. Not sure
you think Ericsson's
phones would be the same, without the Ericsson influence.
Right. And then also, today, which is we're recording this on Sunday, February 13th, the Samsung Galaxy 2 was launched at Mobile World Congress. And again, not many surprises here. It's got a new version of the TouchWiz interface to allow for some really interesting ways you can reorganize the home screens. It has a 4.3-inch WVGA screen. Kind of disappointed here in a few ways that the screen resolution isn't the QHD that all of these higher end phones are going to have with 960 by 540. kind of disappointed that the software isn't terribly changed from what we saw in the current generation Galaxy S phones. But it's nice that they're bumping the screen size. It's going to have a dual-core processor, Samsung dual-core processor, 1080p video capture, which is quite new and sort of the next cool thing in smartphones. And it looks... how do you guys think this thing looks?
I like it.
I'm sorry, Adam, go on.
Looking good. 9.2 millimeters thick.
Super thin, indeed, which is going to be pretty cool with such a large device. It seems to have a big bezel on the top and the bottom, so having that thinness will be pretty cool. Definitely thinner than the Desire HD.
Also remember that it's probably going to look a little bit different in America than this version does, as the other Galaxy S variants did, from the GT i9000.
Yeah, it's going to probably have some chrome on it.
Make it look more like an iPhone.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, something that's a little bit confusing. The original Samsung Galaxy S that went to Europe, I never actually got my hands on it. So it has a menu button on the left, it's got a D-pad in the center, and a back button on the right. I'm assuming, and the Galaxy S2 has the same design. I'm assuming pressing the center button will take you home.
That's always been my assumption, but I've never actually tried it out.
They modified that in the U.S. on all four carrier devices. They changed that. They took away the D-pad. They added 4 buttons instead of these 2. So it's just interesting to see that they're continuing that sort of D-pad design. Not sure many people use a D-pad these days.
Well, they would if they could, maybe.
They would if they could.
Got the Xperia Play.
That has plenty of D-pad options. So, Galaxy S2, this is a big deal, and I'm really curious if they're going to get the penetration with this device that they did with the original Galaxy S, getting it on all 4 carriers. I'm going to say probably not, because there are just so many other good options for carriers to latch onto.
I'll disagree and say if they will. I mean, the Galaxy S was a huge hit, so why wouldn't the carriers want to get the sequel? And this is a way hotter phone. I think at least in terms of design, they hit a homer here. It's just really tight.
And this phone relates very closely to the Infuse, which we were trying to figure out. How do you think these two devices are going to sort of coexist, Evan?
Well, we heard that the Galaxy S2 isn't going to be coming out until June, although that's just a rumor. So, there could be a couple months between Infuse and if the Galaxy S2 comes out in Europe in June, it may not come out in America for a couple months after that. So there may be a good amount of time between the two phones, being on AT&T, for instance.
What were the specs on the Infuse? It had a bigger screen and what else?
But only a single core processor, I believe.
1.2 gigahertz.
Yeah, the 1.2 gigahertz Samsung chip. So that's kind of interesting. Curious to see how the Galaxy S2 and the Infuse benchmark differently, because you've got a faster single core in the Infuse, and then of course dual core 1 gigahertz in the Galaxy S2. But 4.5 inches still takes the cake as the biggest non-tablet smartphone. So I'd imagine
Dell Streak would argue with that.
Yeah, the Dell Streak is too big to be a phone. I think a lot of people would disagree with that. But that's just what I think.
You can hold it up to your face and talk with it, right?
You can. I mean, it is a phone. Have you ever seen a Dell Streak in person?
Me? No, I don't think I have.
Have you, Adam?
No.
At Best Buy, they have them on display. It's huge. And I mean, if you're putting this thing in your pocket, then you've got really big pockets. And it's not comfortable as a phone, and you look like a moron holding it up to your face, because it has a very thick bezel, and it's not just a 5-inch screen, it's a 5-inch screen and a very thick bezel. So knowing that, I think that AT&T could position the Infuse as sort of the mega big screened phone. And then they come around with the Galaxy S2 a few months later saying, kind of like the Infuse, but, smaller screen, faster processor, newer software.
Sure.
Sure, that could be it. So that is the Galaxy S2. Let's move on from here. We'll talk about some things. A lot of other announcements happened in the last week. Something I want to talk about was the Kyocera Echo. Adam and I were in New York to see, David Blaine perform a crazy stunt. Adam, did you figure out how he did that yet?
No, but I think I read somewhere that he can hold his breath for like 17 minutes. It's a world record.
Wow. So let me just explain what happened for the people that didn't know. So we're at the Sprint event in New York City in this sort of ballroom type thing, and David Blaine comes out in a tank full of water. And he stays in there for about 10 or 12 minutes and doesn't come up, so, he's presumably holding his breath if he's truly underwater. And what he's doing, he's opening his mouth and fish are swimming out. He's opening a book and fish are swimming all around him. He lights up a cigar underwater. It's obviously fake, but it looked kind of cool. What else was he... He was checking his phone. What else was he doing under there, Adam?
Or he poured a glass of wine. The wine just kind of floated around in the water.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wearing a suit, he's sitting at a desk.
Yeah, he was wearing a suit sitting at a desk. Then he goes away, and then the president of Kyocera comes on the stage, Dan Heskey from Sprint come on stage, and then it's always so funny how they try to connect what happened with the entertainment with what they're going to talk about. And they were... and they were like, oh, well, David Blaine likes to do more, multitask when things are difficult. And the whole purpose of the dual screen design on the Kyocera Echo is to allow for what they call simultasking, which is a novel idea. And curious to hear what Adam thinks about it. I'm going to just quickly say that I think that if HTC were to do this phone, the Tegra 2 processor, a gigabyte of RAM, 2 high-resolution displays, and beautiful hardware. And by the way, Kyocera didn't deliver any of what I just said. It would be an awesome phone. But Kyocera, they don't have really, any experience doing smartphones, and they're, I think, getting in, what's the phrase? They're in above their head.
Maybe.
What do you think, Adam?
I agree mostly. It's a really innovative idea, and I'm not sure how exactly it'll work with all the apps. It seemed like only certain ones could appear in opposite screens. Did you get that feeling?
Yeah, that's definitely true.
Well,
there's only a couple of the built-in apps will work in that manner where you can move stuff from one screen to another, or they'll work in collusion with each other. And I think they said they will release an SDK, but this phone is going to be sort of, I feel like a one-off, and I don't think that there's going to be enough interest in it for there to really be developers. There'll probably be some, private developers, people in, little communities and forums, but I don't think you'll see a lot of major, commercial software released for this.
Yeah, the SDK is a joke, and no one's gonna use it except for, as you imply, kind of, developers on the side who just want to mess around. Some clarifications on how the software works, and I think this is one of the problems with the Echo, is that in order to understand how it works, you have to listen to someone like me talk about it for 2 minutes. As my understanding, and this may be wrong, is that any app can be shown alongside another app. But if you want to get a special tablet-like view, they gave the email is a perfect example, where on one screen you get to see your message inbox, and on the other screen you get to see an email preview. Those have to be created within the operating system. They have to be coded from scratch. But the cool thing is that the native apps or the third-party apps, you could be playing a game on one screen while having your email up on another, or you could have YouTube up while you're browsing the web, and that stuff will actually sort of function in tandem.
But I don't think you can play 2 games at the same time, though.
Yeah, there's some weird thing going on with the hibernation. Apparently, when you go to one app, the other app will pause, sort of, because Android just doesn't have the capability to run 2 things at one time. It's a single, it's not like a Windows or a Mac computer where you can literally do 2 things at one time. But the concept is just, I love it. I use multiple monitors. I know Evan does too. Adam, do you have multiple monitors for your computer?
Kind of, but one's a TV, so it's just mirrored, really.
All right, well, I mean, at least you know the benefits. So it's a tremendous productivity booster to be able to have email inbox on one screen and the web on another screen, for example. And the same thing's going to be the case with multi-screen smartphones. I mean, it's just such a great capability to be able to see more at one time without having to single task.
Next, we need one that folds out with 4 little screens.
4 little screens, yeah, and it'll have the battery life of a phone you find in your drawer from 20 years ago. It was so funny though, Adam. Remember, the president of Kyocera or whomever was demonstrating it said, "We know that battery is going to be a problem with this," and we were both thinking, "Oh, so they've come up with a new battery technology or some way to increase battery life." And they said, "We're going to include a second battery and a second battery charger so that you can swap batteries in the middle of the day." Great.
So another thing to carry.
Another thing to carry. I mean, if you have two,
Kind of good though.
yeah, it's nice that they did that, but I mean, this product is just becoming a little bit too complex, and hopefully HTC notices how cool of a concept this is and they do something with it. So,
yeah, it's very complex.
It is. I mean, it must have taken them a really long time to do this in terms of the engineering. All right, so let's move on to let's see, what day of the week was this when we're talking about the Veer and the Pre 3? I think that was on Tuesday. Is that right?
Was it? I think it might have been Wednesday.
I think it may have been Wednesday too. You're right. It was Wednesday. So, really big news from Palm. This was sort of Palm. Well, we can't call it Palm anymore. We have to call it HP. This was HP's opportunity to show that their investment in WebOS is going to pay off. And it's interesting that so many people think that WebOS is a really fantastic platform. It's just put on slow hardware with poor battery life. And so they come out with the Veer, which is, of course, a microscopic, tiny phone that is supposed to be sort of the successor to the Pixie. And then they have the Pre 3, which finally bumps the screen resolution of WebOS. So what do you guys think about these? Was this enough for them to do to show that WebOS can be a competitor?
I don't think so. It seems like it's really just more of the same. Not too much innovation there.
I think people want a new form factor. I mean, yeah, the Veer is a new form factor, but people want to see something like really sexy from HP Palm, on the lines of the Galaxy S2 or the Xperia Arc, or and I don't think they're showing that. Yeah, they bumped the resolution and the processor and whatever, but it's still basically the same phone.
I think I agree with you guys totally. I think they spent a lot more time on the touchpad than they did on the Veer and the Pre 3. We're not going to talk much about the touchpad because we don't cover tablets, but it's clear that they made these sort of minor changes to the hardware. They increased the screen size, the resolution. It's got a faster processor in terms of the Pre 3. But they didn't really change the software. It's going to come out with, I think, WebOS 2.2. Is that what it's shipping with?
I think so, yeah.
And I picked up a Palm Pre 2 recently just to have it around, and I was looking. Why is that funny?
Just because you're so into smartphones that you'll buy one, not even a cover for the site or anything, just to have around.
Yeah. Well, gotta have some perspective. And after coming from an Android phone, after coming from an iPhone or even a Windows phone, I'm looking at the home screen and there's 5 icons along the bottom, and I'm like, gee, I wish I could do something else with this blank space. Now, of course, the center area of the screen is used for multitasking, which is great, but I want quicker, fast access to maybe a widget or more than 5 well, there's actually 5 icons, one of which you can't change, so it's only 4 icons. I would have liked them come out with some new version of WebOS that really pushes what makes WebOS great, which is multitasking, but adds a lot more flexibility in terms of ease of access of applications and customizing. They just are moving way too slowly with that. And the Pre-3 is not coming out till the summer. Really? Come on. I mean, by the summer, we're going to have, we'll probably have quad-core phones by then. We'll have the iPhone 5. We will have a lot of really good hardware. We still have CTIA coming in a couple of months, and there's new stuff coming out. And Evan's going to be at CTIA, by the way.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point there. I think this might have been the first time I've ever seen a company both announce a new phone and then also announce the availability of its predecessor at the same event. So what'd you say, Brandon?
I was scoffing. You continue, please.
Basically it was like, we have this great new phone coming out, and oh, hey, this older phone that we announced 3 months ago and people have known about for 5 months or whatever, is finally on pre-order starting next week or something. It's sort of ridiculous. I've never seen anything really like it, and I think they're sort of stepping on their own toes there. I mean, how they can expect sales of Pre-2 to be all that great if people who are really interested in Palm OS know that, in WebOS know that the Pre-3 is coming out in just a couple months.
Yeah, it's almost a bit of a tragedy with the timing. I mean, if a company gets timing wrong on a new product, it can be the difference between its success and its failure. I'm not saying the Pre-3 is going to fail, but by the time the summer comes around, what seems like a cool device today is not going to seem that cool anymore unless they price it very low or they do a software upgrade between now and then. But it's a shame. The Veer will be cool, and it's coming out relatively soon, which will be nice. Although there's no word on which carrier is going to get the Veer.
So I think it just went through the FCC, and I believe it was with GSM bands. So one would think it would be, either AT&T or T-Mobile, and probably AT&T.
Yeah. Oh, sorry about that. Palm Veer, or WebOS. What is it? The HP Veer is what they're calling it. Video playing there. Yeah, so we'll see what happens with WebOS. We like competition, and we wish for the success of WebOS. It's a great operating system, and hopefully it will stand the test of time. So let us move on here. So HTC is talking about new devices on Tuesday at Mobile World Congress. And we're pretty sure that they're going to announce 3 different products. Last year, if you remember, they announced the Legend, the Desire, and the... Wait, is that right? Yeah, the Legend, the Desire, and the HD Mini. So kind of the number 3 seems to work very well for HTC. And this year, we think it's going to be the Desire HD2, which should be awesome. Their high-end flagship phone. And then the Desire 2, which we've seen leaked as the Saga. And the Wildfire 2, which will be sort of a lower-end Android smartphone with probably a lower resolution display. We kind of have an idea of what the specs will be like for the Desire HD2. It's probably going to have a dual-core processor with a lot of RAM. It's going to have the same 4.3-inch screen that the current Desire HD has, which is rolling out across the world, or at least to AT&T tomorrow.
Today.
It's today, actually. So if the Desire HD2 and what we know about it is going to be true, I'm curious to what you think, Evan, because you wrote the Dear HTC, Please Step Up Your Game article. Do you think this is good enough for 2011?
Yeah, I mean, if the rumored specs turn out to be true, it'll be pretty good. It sounds like they're still not doing Bluetooth 3.0, which I know a lot of people are annoyed at, considering Samsung and even LG have been incorporating that for a while. think it's going to have a lot to do with the form factor of the phone. It seems that Samsung's able to pack a lot of high-end features into, apparently the thinnest smartphone in the world, at least up to this point. So if HTC is not really able to do the same, then I think it's going to be considered, a loss for them.
Well, we know the form factor of the Desire HD2. I mean, it's going to look like, we don't know what
That's the Desire 2.
Oh, well, I meant the Desire HD2.
Right. I don't think we do know the form factor, do we?
Well, it's going to be a slate device. It's going to look like the current Desire HD, but probably thinner, maybe a thinner bezel. I mean, what else?
But I mean, the specifics on that, the devil's in the details, and that's what it's really going to come down to is, how thin is it? How thin is the bezel? What did they do with the industrial design? What kind of materials are they using? Do they have Gorilla Glass on it? All these things are going to be important.
Guess we'll have to see. HTC, you're right, is one to bring forth some details. Hopefully they're going to be more than just, you take off the back battery cover and you see orange or yellow as they did with a lot of their recent devices. But the Desire 2 looks just like and we have seen pictures of this all over the place. It's going to look just like its predecessor, just a little bit cleaner. And so, if that trend continues, then the Desire HD2 is going to look very similar to the Desire HD. But of course, we will have to see. Also, with these new devices, HTC is going to talk about their new version of the Sense interface for Android. I think we're up to 3.0 now. And we got a little tip about what it will entail. We think that there might be something having to do with transparency with widgets, although that's less certain than the redesigned application tray. So, in HTC Sense applications, you get the little slider along the bottom. In email, for example, you can filter between unread messages, flagged messages, and so on. In the application tray for Sense 3.0, you'll have presumably 3 different options on the bottom. One is favorite applications, one's downloaded applications, one is all apps, which is great because right now when you hit the apps button, it's an endless list of apps, and Sense 3.0 will really help with that. But what else could HTC do to their Sense interface? Have either of you used their interface for Android?
I've used it on the Hero.
Oh, right.
That was a while ago.
That was the first gen of Sense.
Yeah.
And how about
a custom ROM, but I don't remember.
Right. How about you, Evan? Have you used Sense?
Yeah, but a while ago on custom ROMs and on Windows mobile hardware.
Sure. Well, I've been following the changes in Sense very, very closely, and the difference between Generation 1 and Generation 2 was that with 2, you got some more widgets, you got ties to htcsense.com, it was faster. A lot of marginal changes. I mean, nothing really that significant. They rearranged the personalized menu so you could flip through your live wallpapers and your regular wallpapers like cover flow. For Sense 3.0, I would love to finally see an option to turn off Sense. And I know they're not going to do it. But a lot of people really appreciate sort of a clean, light interface. And you can't turn off Sense very easily. There are some workarounds. You can use your own home screen launcher, for example. But then when you go into email, you're still seeing Sense. When you go into the dialer, you're still seeing Sense. It'd be nice to see something different there.
Yeah, you're right. I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, and along those lines, let's say that they don't give you the option to turn off Sense. They should have the option to customize those little sliders along the bottom. In my email application, I never, ever, ever go off the first tab, which is, I'm looking now, it is just all. Or what do they call it? They just call it received. And then they have conversations, favorites, unread, marked, meeting invitations, attachments. Come on. I mean, do people really use a lot of this stuff? It'd be nice to turn off certain, elements to the Sense interface and even rearrange these little buttons along the bottom. But these are just little wishes that I have, and they're probably not going to bring those changes forward because they want to control the experience, and rightly so.
So for you, it's just taking up space, really.
Yeah, it is. And in my mind, I think that means it's slowing down my device. It's probably not true, but when I see more stuff on the screen, I think my device is slower. So cool. So so that's Tuesday for HTC, and then tomorrow, or probably by the time you're listening to this on Valentine's Day, LG is holding a press event. They're going to talk about the same devices they talked about at CES, but they're going to add the Optimus 3D, which was actually announced in a press release today. And we were talking about this in the last podcast, or PocketCast, about what a 3D display would bring to the smartphone experience. And we kind of have an answer here. It's going to do 3D video and 3D images, glasses free, which should be pretty cool, but it doesn't look like they're doing anything to the interface here in terms of making it 3D capable.
I don't know if we know that yet. Either way, we do know that it will be able to teach you how to perform yoga. So right there, they're gonna pick up a huge segment of the market.
That video was hilarious. Did you see that video, Adam?
No.
This girl is our Optimus 3G, and then she's watching a TV show, and she's like, I don't understand this, and she takes out her 3D Optimus and sets it on the mat, and suddenly images start popping out, and she's like, oh, now I get it. This is how you do yoga. It's kind of hilarious.
Yeah, that's great.
I've got to wonder, though, I feel like this was rushed to the market a little bit just to be the first 3D smartphone. I could imagine that playing video back is going to be a little weird. The glasses-free 3D stuff that's out there right now isn't even close to ready. So maybe it's not the case if you're talking a smaller form factor, lower resolution. But I guess we'll have to see.
I think you have to remember, too, that if you look at LG as a whole, as a bigger company, they have a lot invested in 3D, not just on the phone side, but especially on the
TV side.
On the home theater side. So they're going to want to make a whole experience around, for you to be able to bring 3D content from from your Blu-ray player, your TV, to your phone, and so obviously a main part of that is getting some penetration with these mobile devices too. So what they say, no one's going to make content for this stuff until there's some hardware out there, and I think that's what they're doing right now is trying to get some of this stuff in people's hands, even if, like you said, it's not 100% ready for consumers, or there's not as many applications for it as there may be in a few years.
Yeah, fair point. I mean, once they get this stuff out there, and I'm sure they'll release an SDK so the developers can make 3D apps. Hopefully other companies will follow suit, but then are we talking about multiple 3D standards and multiple SDKs? That will be pretty detrimental to the 3D handset market.
Yeah, I think it'll be like different codecs. Right now you have quite a few codecs, and devices are partly judged on how many of them they can support, and I think it'll probably be the same for 3D.
Good point. It's interesting to see how all these companies that make more than one product try to bridge together all of their different products. And we saw this this week with Palm, talking about how Palm does tablets now, and smartphones and computers and printers and servers, and they want to link them all together. And then LG has similar ambitions, and it's interesting to see that all of these electronic OEMs are doing phones now, and they're thinking about ways to tie their stuff together, but then you get stuck in a certain ecosystem, and you feel compelled to buy an LG TV or a Sony TV, so it works with you.
Exactly.
That's what they want.
I must be a big sucker then. I really like my Samsung TV and my Samsung phone. I was driving down the road today and I saw a Samsung bulldozer, and thought it was kind of funny.
Yeah, did you want to get one?
I wanted to get one just to have it. Just to say I have it.
Have any of you seen a glasses-less 3D screen?
I saw it at CES on a 52-inch display, and it was very difficult to see because you have to stand exactly in the right spot, and the resolution was definitely far lower than HD. So my understanding was it wasn't there yet, but apparently it is there. And well, I mean, you have the Nintendo. What do they call it? The 3.
Yes.
What is the name of that?
3DS, I think.
3DS, yeah. So apparently it's there for smaller sizes. It's good enough, and who knows? Maybe this is the next thing. Maybe the Desire HD2 will have 3D. Evan, maybe that's one of the little surprises.
Possible.
I really like how they did 3D effects on the Zoom HD. Remember that? Very subtle, but as you're moving, you could see that the elements that were higher up were moving at a different rate. And if you tilted it, they would move slightly at a different angle as if it was 3D. So it was using an accelerometer to get little 3D effects in there.
Kind of like the photo gallery in stock Android. I don't know if you've ever seen that. If you tilt the device, it kind of looks like the elements are moving. So I know what you mean. Yeah, that is a cool effect. I mean, it makes for a more pleasant experience, perhaps, or maybe as we'll find in a year, 3D doesn't belong on a phone, just like maybe dual displays don't belong on a phone. A lot of experimentation right now. It's kind of cool to see all these different ideas.
Yeah.
Very good. So let's move on. Let's see. We were talking about Tuesday. The Verizon iPhone 4 became available in stores, and everyone was expecting massive lines. In fact, I was going to go to a Verizon iPhone store in Center City, Philadelphia, to interview people in the line, but apparently the lines didn't happen. Why didn't the lines happen?
It's a good question. I mean, the pre-orders were certainly popular enough. I mean, didn't they churn through like 2 million phones in 2 hours or something?
Right.
So I don't know. Maybe the whole culture of there being such long lines for iPhones actually kept people away this time. Everyone thought there was going to be lines, so no one showed up and there were no lines. I mean, this is obviously a phone that people want, so it's not like they're not going to sell them. Maybe Verizon made it easier to order it online, or you can get it through Best Buy, and it's available in more places on launch. I mean, there could be a number of reasons, I think, and I'm sure we'll find out.
Yeah, that's got to be the truth. I mean, if you look at the iPhone 4 launch, some of the the dodos that stood in line for 11 hours, hint me. I stood in line because I thought that I wouldn't be able to get one. I didn't think supply would be high enough. I thought I'd have to wait until a few weeks came around. But with the case of the Verizon iPhone 4, it's a device that has presumably been in production for a while. You can get it multiple places, as you implied, Evan. And, there's no perceived, lack of inventory. So people aren't lining up. Maybe people did go to the Verizon stores, they just didn't line up in the morning. Maybe they went when they got home from work or something.
Plus, it was cold out, so it's not really that much fun to go be interviewed standing in line in the cold.
Great point. We've got to remember that the Verizon or the AT&T iPhone launched in the summer, so that's a different story. I guess people are more tolerant to heat than they are to cold.
And Steve Jobs didn't announce it, so there's no reality distortion field there.
Yeah, no one told them. If Steve didn't tell people to go out and buy it, they should go.
That's funny.
Someone at Verizon said to buy it, but...
Yeah, without Steve Jobs, I mean, people aren't going to be able to make buying decisions. Anyway. All right, so let's move on. We've got a couple more stories to talk about. We've got IE9... switching to Windows Phone 7. IE9 possibly or definitely coming to Windows Phone 7 in the Mango update, although we're still waiting for the copy and paste update. What significance do you think this has on Windows Phone 7, Adam? Have you been using IE9 on the desktop?
Yes. It's IE9 versus IE7 on the desktop is a huge difference. The performance increase is great. The user interface design is excellent. There's just so many improvements from IE9 over IE7 and IE8. On the phone, it's a little different because Windows Phone 7's version of IE really works pretty well. Now it's fast, it's smooth, pitch to zoom in, it all works really nicely. There's not a lot of bloat in the interface. It's very clean design.
Mm-hmm.
So having IE9 come to that, I think it's really more about the standard support and HTML5.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to work to make HTML5 work really nicely on the phone. So I think that's the big deal about IE9.
Yeah, I think it would be nice, and I think what they're trying to do is maintain the same level of speediness. And Windows Phone 7 has, I think, the best browser of any platform, even better than an iPhone 4. They want to keep that speediness while adding the HTML5 compatibility. Do you think they're going to do Flash?
Yeah, we don't know. Not sure about that. We can hope.
I mean, they'd like to, right? It
Yeah.
tends to be more on the end of Adobe. If you only have a limited amount of people to work on this stuff, you're obviously going to concentrate on Android and other platforms. I think that you probably perceive as having more penetration.
Yeah.
What do you think the best way to implement Flash on a browser would be?
What are the options?
Well, you can have it playing right away, everything loads at once, and potentially bogs down your whole system.
That's a really interesting question. I tend to, in Android, you can specify either to not load Flash, to ask to load Flash, or to always load Flash. And I have it set to ask to load Flash, but I just want it to load, and I don't have it just load because then the page slows down. So I'd love to see somebody get this right, where Flash will always load. It doesn't have to be a question, but the browser performance is not impacted. We're not there yet, and maybe multi-core processors on phones will finally allow for that.
Yeah, here's hoping.
The Nexus S, the Inspire 4G, by my count, not including, the Optimus 2X, are the fastest, or two of the fastest phones out there. And both of them can do this Flash thing, but it's barely Flash because you've got to decide if you want it all the time, half the time, or none of the time. It's just not the true sort of internet experience that I would hope that we would be able to have these days.
And a lot of Flash sites aren't really optimized for finger input either.
Yeah, that's another big problem. I mean, you go to like a restaurant website with a menu or some sort of Flash animation. It's just not made for your finger. It's made for a mouse clicker, so...
Even like a mouse over effect, you have to move your mouse over the thing for some things to show up or anything to happen.
Yeah, they don't really translate well to the mobile experience. So IE9 hopefully will be cool on a mobile phone, bringing better performance. When the heck is this copy and paste update coming?
We don't know. They said within the next few months is the official statement.
Yeah, this stuff's hard, Brandon. Copy and paste. It's complicated.
Yeah, I don't understand it. I don't understand why they couldn't have rolled this into the first release of Windows Phone 7. Unless there's some underpinning impact. I mean, they have to, I guess, code some sort of virtual clipboard and all this, but it can't be that difficult. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
We need to get Gabe in here to opine.
Yes, Gabe is our resident genius when it comes to all things technical related to smartphones, so perhaps he could shed some light on why copy and paste is so challenging in Windows Phone 7.
Well, we saw it in the emulator, remember that?
Yeah, it's in the emulator, it's there, it works, and I'll get it on a phone.
Even in the first one, you could do Control-C if you had your keyboard on the emulator.
I didn't know that. There you go. So it was there since it was in there, just the UI aspect wasn't there.
Yeah, the interface.
Very good. And one more thing we wanted to talk about here. We're getting close to the next release cycle of the iPhone. Well, not getting close, but close enough to where we can sort of talk about it. And there's a rumor that there may be a mini iPhone, sort of to have a lower price device to, I don't know. What would this accomplish?
I'm surprised they haven't done this already, to be honest with you. I'm surprised that there's not a whole lot on iPhone.
That's a good question. Don't you think that could, I don't know, dilute the iPhone brand a little bit?
No way. That it's a billion-dollar brand. Like any other company, they should be leveraging that and trying to expand it even more. And there's still tons of people that would love an iPhone and can't afford one. And Apple's goal should be to get iPhones into those people's hands. And that's part of what they were doing by continuing to offer the 3GS at lower prices. But
Yeah.
they need to go even further and have stuff that's absolutely free on contract.
Adam, were you going to say something?
Oh, I was just agreeing they've got all the old ones are still available. Well, not all of them, but those are there for the lower end purchasers. But
I'm not sure that people necessarily want like last generation hardware. They want stuff that's new, that's just not as expensive.
I'd like to see somebody, Apple, Google, figure out a way to make data plans cheaper, because I think that's the biggest sticking point when people are getting new phones. The upfront fee is annoying and it gets expensive, but the recurring data charge is just, it's killer. It adds up so fast.
That's why the phones are so cheap, though, Brandon. I mean, we wouldn't be getting these $500 to $800 phones for $100 or $200 if they weren't making a ton on the service. So you can get cheaper data as you did with porting your Google Voice number, but the trade-off is you have to pay a lot for the hardware.
Yeah, that is a very good point. That's a very good point. I mean, that equation works perfectly. So you go buy a Nexus S on T-Mobile from Best Buy, and you pay $530 for it, but you don't have to sign a 2-year contract, but you paid $530 for it. So it's the trade-off. In obviously other countries, it's sort of the opposite. You buy an unlocked phone for $600, and then your plans are cheaper because they're not subsidizing the cost of your handset. So I guess it all depends on sort of how you look at things. If you want a bigger upfront cost, or if you don't mind spreading that cost over many months. Oh, I wish they had I don't know, other options. So yeah, iPhone Mini could be cool. I think there's an opportunity there, but you can't go. I don't think they'd go much below 3.5 inches. I mean,
I don't think they'll change the screen size at all. Steve Jobs, this is the perfect size.
Yeah.
Nothing else is good.
Nothing else is good.
But now you have to compete with the Veer now, don't you?
Well, the Veer has a keyboard on it, right?
Veer has a keyboard.
So, now you're going to have a small iPhone with a keyboard.
The
Veer is clearly going to take over that segment of the market unless Apple does something to stop it.
The mini phone segment of the market.
Yeah, the one that doesn't exist yet.
Yeah, exactly. Does that segment exist? I mean, obviously people have no problem carrying 4.3-inch screen devices in their pocket. This 55-year-old family friend was over the other day, and he had a Droid X, and I said, "Don't you mind how you're old and
You're old."
I didn't actually say that to him. I said, "You're older. We grew up with this tech. We don't mind carrying large things in our pocket. But what about you?" He recently came from a flip phone. He said, it's not that big of a deal. And I think that we're all hooked on these larger screens, and this segment of mini phones, I don't know if that even exists. I mean, did the Palm Pixie sell well? I don't think it sold so well. That was a
Here's
tiny...
the real thing with the Veer is that clip-on USB port / 3.5 millimeter jack.
That's gross.
Yeah, who's going to want to carry that around? I mean, that jutting out of the phone. I don't know what they were thinking there.
So you can't charge your phone unless you use that appendage?
Or you use the Touchstone, of course.
Oh, of course, the Touchstone. That's a great way to get people to buy the Touchstone, obviously.
Exactly.
Touchstone's cool. It is cool.
Yeah, and it's gaining functionality, too.
What kind of functionality?
Well, now they have it so when it's docked, there's a special API that you can make it do stuff when it's there. alarm clock or different types of widgets, and I forget what they call it exactly, but it was a whole it was a feature they were touting with WebOS 2.0.
It's kind of a cool idea. You don't have to mess with chargers, but just start throwing them in for free, putting them in the box, make our unboxings a little bit more interesting. They don't even include headphones anymore. I mean, are they going to stop including chargers next time?
Right, bring your own battery.
BYOB. Very, very good, Evan. All right, well, I think that's all we wanted to talk about. Obviously, a lot more news to come on Mobile World Congress. The next time we do the PocketCast, we're probably going to be talking a lot about what HTC unveiled. We're eagerly waiting to see what they have in store, and yeah, a lot of really interesting things happening in mobile this week. So, Adam and Evan, thank you for joining me on the PocketCast episode 3 here.
Thank you.
And thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time. That's it for now.